Okay, we are going to jump in and do a review today. And this is going to be an Arabic 130 review. So if you took Arabic 130, you should remember a lot of these materials. If you didn't take Arabic 130, this is a great refresher so that you know what things you need to know or what things you may need to work on before we get started in this class. So, many things that we're going to be going over. We're going to start off with letters and sounds. In Arabic 131, you need to be proficient in reading and writing. So you should be able to recognize the letters, recognize words, and be able to pronounce them with a fair amount of ease. So let's go ahead and start. Letters and sounds. So we have a couple of pairs of words here, and they are slightly blurry. Maybe I can make it bigger. And I'm going to say a word, and in each of those, I want you to tell me which one I am saying between each of those. So for number one, تأثر. تأثر. Which one is it, the right or the left? Very good. So that letter that is after the ta is what letter? Oops. That letter is a hamza. Very good. That letter is a hamza. Versus this letter. What is this letter right here? That letter is an ayn. Very good. Okay, so when it comes to the hamza, remember the hamza makes the a sound. The ayn makes the a sound that's in your throat. And remember the hamza, when it's in the beginning of a word, you'll see it sitting on the alif chair. If it's in the middle of the word, you may see it sitting on a ya chair. You may see it sitting on a waw chair. And like this word, you may see it sitting on an alif chair. And you can also see it, if it's after a long vowel, it'll sit by itself on a line. So for instance, like the word ja'a. How would you write the word ja'a? You would have jim, alif, ja. Come on, there we go. A. With a fatha. Ja'a. Okay. Okay, اثنين. في الصف. اثنين, number two. في الصف. Between these two pairs, which one do we have? في الصف. And that goes back to our rules of حروف شمسية والقمرية, sun letters and moon letters. Remember when we talk about sun letters and moon letters, okay? Sun letters are letters which you use the front portion or the mid portion of your tongue to pronounce. And moon letters are letters where you do not use your tongue to pronounce them. In sun letters, if you have alif, lam, and a letter that's huruf shamsiyya, it's a letter that is a sun letter, what we do is we skip the lam, we don't pronounce it, and we pronounce that sun letter with the shadda. So we take the a sound and we skip right over into that letter. So for instance, when we say the word saf, which means class, if I want to say saf with al on the front, I have to look at the alif lam and I say, okay, I have alif lam and then I have this letter here, which is a sun letter. Because it's shamsi and we use our tongue, when you say sa, you're using the sides of your tongue, they're hitting your molars. So we skip the lam and we pronounce the a sound here and connect it to that slad. So we get as, saf, as-saf. Okay, as-saf. Whereas in moon letter, your tongue is not being used to pronounce that letter. So if we have alif lam and a letter that's a moon letter, we simply pronounce it al and then whatever that letter is. Okay, so let's do an example. If I say I have alif lam and I want to use the word kitab, we look at the letter after the alif lam, which is this kaf, ka, K uses the back of your tongue. It doesn't use the middle or the front of your tongue. It's in your throat. So that means it's considered a moon letter. So we pronounce it al, and then the kaf, we pronounce it the kasra, al-kitab. So when you have a moon letter after alif lam, you're going to hear al. When you have a sun letter, you will not hear the lam. You're going to hear that sun letter pronounced twice because you pronounce it with a shadda. Remember that when we have a sun letter, or any word, for instance, if we have, I'll give you an example here. Let's erase these. Okay. When we have words that have alif lam, okay, and there's a word before it. So for instance, if I say fi and al-bayt, meaning in the house, we don't pronounce it fi al-bayt, okay? Remember that when you have a word that has alif lam and there's a word before it, you're going to take the last letter of that word. So in this case, the last letter is this ya. That's the vowel sound E. And you're going to connect it here to the lam, al-bayt. So instead of saying fi al-bayt, we're going to say fil bayt. And it's, if you were to say fi al-bayt 10 times, you would end up connecting them in this way anyhow. Okay? Fil bayt. Let's do another one. If I want to say in the book. How would you say that? We're going to take fi and we're going to connect it here to that lam. Fil kitab. So instead of saying fi al kitab, fil kitab, connecting the two together. Now what happens if you have a sun letter? So if we have fi, and like this example here, a saf. I want to say in the class. This word by itself, saf, do we pronounce it al? No, because that slad is a sun letter. We just went over it right here. So we pronounce that as-saf. So if you have a word that's before it, remember that you connect that last vowel, that last word, to the shadda here. So we're not going to say fi al because the lam is never pronounced when you have a sun letter. We're going to connect that fi sound to the slad. Fis-saf. Fis-saf. So it's going to sound like it's one word, but it's two. Fis-saf. Let's do another one. If I want to say in the car. So we have fi, and then we look at this word. How do we pronounce this word as-sayyara? You have alif lam and the letter sin. Is sin a sun letter or a moon letter? Say sa. If you're not sure whether you use your tongue, pull your tongue back to the back of your mouth and try to pronounce that letter. You can't pronounce sin without your tongue. It uses the middle portion of your tongue against the molars. Therefore, it's a sun letter. So we pronounce it with a shadda on the sin. As-sayyara. As-sayyara is how it's pronounced by itself. So when you have a word before it, we're going to connect the word before it, which is fi. Okay. Fi, we're going to connect it to that sin. Fis-sayyara. Okay, fis-sayyara. So that was a little refresher to sun and moon letters. Let's go back to these right here. Shukran. Shukran, which one is being said? It's a little hard to tell here, but there's tanween on here. There's two fathas on top. So let's erase some things. What is tanween? Fathatain, dhammatain can look like this or it can look like this. Okay. So fathatain, dhammatain, and kasratain. This is what we call tanween. Tanween is the doubling. It's called nenation in English. It's when you have your fatha sound. Remember, fatha by itself makes the a sound. Dhamma is u, kasra is i, a, u, i. When you double it, it's taking that sound and adding a noon. An, on, in. An, on, in. So if I have the word kitab and I pronounce it with 2 lammas on top. Remember the 2 lammas you can write like that, or you can write a regular lamma here with a tail. So 2 lammas, you would take the word kitab, and because it's on the ba, you pronounce the ba with the un sound. Kitabun. How about with the kasra? Kitabin with the in sound. Fathatain is special. Remember, when you write fathatain, you have to write it with an alif. Kitaban. Okay? The only time you don't have to write the 2 fathas with an alif is if the last letter of the word has a ta' marbuta. Okay? Like this, for instance. Shajaratan. You can just write it right on top. Remember, ta' marbuta, when you have a ta' marbuta at the end, if it has a vowel on it, then you pronounce the T sound. If it doesn't, you don't. So if it didn't have this tanween, we'd just pronounce it shajara. But because we have the fathatain on top, we pronounce it shajaratan. So if you have a word that has ta' marbuta at the end, you can pronounce it, you can put tanween right on top, the fathatain. Or if a word ends, here's the word, shajara means tree, masa means evening. If you have a hamza at the end of that word, you can put tanween right on top, masa'an. Okay? So for fathatain, you have to have an alif written with that fathatain unless the word ends in a ta' marbuta or a hamza. Okay? Remember, it doesn't change the meaning of the name or the meaning of the word. It's just pronunciation. Okay, so let's go back here. Number 4, tufaha. Tufaha. What is this right here? That is what we call a ta' marbuta. That's how it's connected there. If it's not connected, it'll look like this. Tufaha. So remember, when it comes to gender, when a word ends in ta' marbuta, it's a feminine word. So the word kitab for book, is that a feminine word? No, because it doesn't end in a ta' marbuta. But the word for tree, shajara, is it a feminine word? Yes, it is, because it ends in a ta' marbuta. Words that refer to human, so these 2 are objects. Words that refer to human can take both genders. So for instance, I can have, you should know this word, ustad means teacher. If I want to make it feminine, I simply add a ta' marbuta to the end, ustada. Ustada. And remember here, we're not connecting it because the letter dal doesn't connect to what comes after it. But you could have a word that does connect. So for instance, Habib means doctor. If I wanted to make it feminine, Habiba, I simply add a ta' marbuta to the end, and now it's feminine. Okay? And remember, whenever you have, here, I'll put that there, whenever you have the ta' marbuta at the end, the way that you pronounce it is the letter before it, you simply pronounce it with a fatha. You only pronounce this T sound if you see a vowel on top of it. So if it was tabibatun, if I had tabibati, right? So if you have a vowel sound on it, then you pronounce the T sound. Otherwise, you're simply pronouncing the letter before with a fatha. Okay? And that's the feminine marker. Whoops, let's go back here. Okay, so let's go back. Anwar. Anwar. Right here. Anwar. If it was this, we would have pronounced it an-nur because you have alif lam and then a noon. Alif lam and then noon. Noon uses your tongue, therefore you pronounce it with the shadda. An-nur. Okay. The second one, as-sawm. As-sawm. It's a little bit hard to read here. I know it's blurry. It's a shadda and a fatha and a sukoon here. As-sawm. So same thing here that we did with the sun letter. Sad is a sun letter. Therefore, it's pronounced with a shadda, and we do not pronounce that lam here. We just skip over to that sad, as-sawm. Okay. How about this one? Ma'a ustad. Ma'a ustad. How would we pronounce this? Ma'a. You should know this word. It means with. If you have ma'a and al-ustad, I'll put it here so it's a little bit bigger. Ma. Okay. Al-ustad, with the teacher. Al-ustad. So remember, when you have words that have alif lam, you have to connect the two together when you pronounce them. So instead of saying ma'a al-ustad, we're going to say ma'al ustad. You're just going to connect it here to this lam. Because the letter after the lam is the hamza. Hamza doesn't use your tongue. It's a moon letter. And in moon letters, we said that you pronounce the al sound. So you're going to hear that lam. Ma'al ustad, with the teacher. Okay, last one. Let's do ala. Which one is ala? Good. Ala means on. Ila, with the hamza here, means to. Okay? Ila, ala. Good. So this is just a little bit of a review of your sounds. I will add one more thing for the sounds. Remember that we did your short vowel sounds, fatha, dhamma, kasra, a, u, and e. You can write it like this. Or some people, if they want to write it like this. Transliteration is a little bit hard, but just a, u, e. And then you have your long vowel sounds, which is alif, a, waw, u, and ya, e. A, u, e. A, u, e. So these are short, and these ones are long. You should also know that sukoon, when a letter has sukoon on it, it means you're stopping. Like, for instance, this word that we did, ustad, you're stopping on the scene with the sukoon. Ustad. And then shadda, which we've seen, is the doubling of the sounds. Okay? Okay, so let's move on. Let's look at grammatical gender, which we just talked about. That words are either masculine or feminine. Okay? When it comes to things that are human, you can take both genders. Okay? Both genders. So let's look at another word that we've done in 130. Jar, which was neighbor. Jar, neighbor. How would I make it feminine neighbor, female neighbor? You simply add a ta marbuta to the end. Jara. Now it's a female neighbor. Remember, the letter ra here does not connect. That's the reason why you're writing this ta marbuta here like this. Jar, jara. Okay. Let's do another one with a human quality. Okay. So let's do Habib. Habib, beloved. How would I make it beloved if you're referring to a woman? You take the same word Habib and you add a ta marbuta to the end. And when you're pronouncing it, you don't have to write the fatha, but you're simply pronouncing the letter before it with a fatha. Okay, Habiba. Habib, Habiba. When it comes to objects, so non-humans, and non-humans meaning these are just objects, they cannot take both. It's either one or the other. Okay? So for instance, we saw the word kitab for book. Oops. We saw the word kitab for book. It's masculine. the word for book will never be feminine. You cannot add a ta marbuta to it and have it mean a feminine book. That's just not how it works. So all objects take a gender, either masculine or feminine, and it's just grammatical gender. It just means there's two categories. Okay? Let's look at another word. What was the word for class? Sluf. Is it masculine or feminine? Good. How about car? Sayyara. Sayyara ends in a ta marbuta, therefore this word is feminine. Okay. If we do another word, ghurfa means room, ends in ta marbuta, therefore it is feminine. What I would recommend is go through the vocab list that we have on Quizlet, the 130 practice, and just go through and see, can you tell what words are feminine, what words are masculine? The easiest way to tell is words that end in ta marbuta are feminine. Words that end without ta marbuta are masculine. Okay? And there are some other rules, but this is just the most basic way. So now that we have nouns, gender and nouns, let's talk about noun adjective agreement. Because nouns and adjectives, whenever you have a noun and an adjective phrase, they must agree in gender. They agree in other things too, which is something that we're going to learn in 131. But what you should already know is that they agree in gender. Okay, so let's look at some examples. If we want to say new book, okay, and really it's like saying a new book. We take the word kitab and then we put the word new after it. Remember, we call this noun adjective phrases because the noun comes first and then the adjective. So here's your noun, book, and here's your adjective, jadid. Kitab, jadid, meaning a new book. Okay, it just implies this meaning of a. But if I wanted to say a new car, the word car has to go first. The noun goes first. Sayyara. Sayyara is feminine. Therefore, the word jadid for new, what do? We also have to add a ta marbuta here. Sayyara jadida. Okay? So if the noun has ta marbuta, the adjective will also take ta marbuta. Okay? So you do one. We'll stick with our word new. New neighbor. And new neighbor. But this one will make masculine and this one will make feminine. So pause the video and go ahead and write what it would be. Okay, so masculine, jar, jadid, new neighbor. If it's feminine, we're simply adding ta marbuta, jara, jadida. Okay. Okay, now when it comes to noun adjective agreement, they also agree. So I'll call this, noun adjective phrase. They agree in gender, like we've seen. And they also agree in definiteness. Okay, what does that mean? What does definiteness mean? Definiteness means whether or not the word is definite with alif lam. Alif lam al is the definite article. So if I said, like the example we had in the slide before, kitab jadid. Kitab jadid means new book, and it implies the meaning of a new book. If I wanted to change the meaning of this, and if I wanted to say the new book, the word for the is the definite article al. So I have to add alif lam, al kitab. But because it's a noun adjective phrase, this isn't a complete sentence, it's a phrase. That means the word new also has to have alif lam. الجديد. Okay? So you go ahead. I'm going to give you 2 examples. You're going to say a new car, which we did in the slide before, and the new car. Okay? You should have paused it and did it. So a new car without the al. Excuse me. سيارة جديدة. So notice there's no the, so we don't put alif lam, and it's a feminine word, therefore both of them are going to take alif lam. If I make it definite on top of that, I have the word as-sayyara, the car, and I want to say new, and I also have to add the alif lam here. Al-jadida, the new car. Notice a couple of things here that we covered. We have seen is a sun letter. It's harf shamsi. So we're not saying al, we're saying as-sayyara. Whereas over here, jim, we're pronouncing it al-jadida. And jim is the only exception to the rule, which I want to bring up, that jim is the only letter that you use your tongue, but it's considered a moon letter. It's the only exception to that rule. So this is noun, adjective, phrases. Remember that noun, adjective, phrases match in gender. That's the most important thing. And they also match in definiteness, which is something that we'll cover more in lesson 1 and 2. Okay. So let's move on now. Let's talk about personal pronouns and possessive pronouns. In this class, we covered several pronouns. Okay. And I'm going to list out the singular ones here. We covered the word ana, which is I. I'll actually give myself a little bit more room. Ana, which is I. Like we say, ana ismi, I. That's first person. Okay. Then we have second person, which is anta, you, masculine, and nt, which is you, feminine. That's second person when you're talking to someone. Okay. And third person, huwa, which is he, and hiya, which is she. This is third person. Okay. So we have first person, second person, third person. First person is when you're talking. Second person when you're talking to someone. Third person you're talking about someone. Okay. Ana, anta, anti, huwa, hiya. And remember when we talked about in 130, anta, fatha here symbolizes the masculine. Anti, the kasra here is what symbolizes the feminine. Anta, anti. So now let's talk about possessive pronouns. So these right here are your personal pronouns. Possessive pronoun is when you take that personal pronoun and you want to change it into mine. So instead of saying I, you want to refer to yourself, that something is mine. Okay? You want to refer to it as yours. So these possessive pronouns are what happens when you attach a pronoun to the end of a noun. And possessive pronouns get attached to nouns. Okay? They get attached to nouns. And then they also get attached to other types of words, which we will come to a little bit later, that are called harf. Okay? So for now, let's look at nouns. So if I have, let's stick with the same word that we did in the last slide, which was kitab. If I want to make it my book, I take the word kitab, and to make it mine, I add the letter ya to the end of it. Kitabi. When you attach ya to the end of a noun, it means my. Kitabi. So when you add that ya to the end, it makes it my. Kitabi. So if we did the same thing, what if we take the word saf and I want to make it my class? Remember, saf has a shadda on it. My class. What we do is we take the word saf and we attach a ya to the end. And now it's my class. Safi. Okay? So the personal pronoun, ana, is I. But the possessive pronoun, when you're referring to yourself, something is mine, that's the ya that we add to the end. So now let's look at anta and anti. When you want to make something yours, let's stick with the same words here. We want to stick with the word kitab. And notice I'm keeping kitab open so that I can attach to the end of it. When I want to make something yours, I add the letter kaf to the end. And for the masculine, we're going to do a fatha, just like we did anta. And for the feminine, we're going to do kasra, just like we did anti. And when we're pronouncing it, we're going to pronounce the letter at the end of the word with the dhamma, and then the kaf with the fatha. So it's kitabuka, kitabuki, kitabuka, kitabuki. And here this means your book. And the gender here in the word your refers to the person whose book it is. It's not the book. You're not changing the gender of the book. It's the gender of the person who has the book, whose book it is. Okay? So if I'm talking to Joe, it's going to be kitabuka, your book. If I'm talking about Layla, and she's in front of me and I'm pointing to her book, and I'm saying, oh, it's your book, kitabuki. So pause the video. You're going to do the same thing for the word saf. You're going to make it your class. Okay. We're going to do here, safuka and safuki. So the word saf has a shadda in it. That's why you're pronouncing the fa twice. You just pronounce that last letter fa with the dhamma, just like we pronounce this ba here with the dhamma, and then you attach that pronoun. Okay. And then for huwa and hiya, he and she, if I want to say his and hers, okay, so I want to change this to his and hers. We're going to take the same word, kitab, and if I want to make it his, I add hu at the end, the letter ha with the dhamma. Pronounce the letter before with a dhamma as well. Kitabuhu. Kitabuhu. And for hers, kitabu ha alif. Kitabuhu. Kitabuha. Okay. Now this right here, same thing, safuhu and safuha, if we use the word saf. But I want to give you a different example, just because in this case the ha is connected because the ba is a letter that connects. But let's say I want to say neighbor. I want to say his neighbor and her neighbor. So because the ra doesn't connect, the ha is going to look like this. Jaruhu. Her neighbor, jaruha. So notice here, the neighbor is masculine, and then it's his neighbor that you're talking about. Like let's say Joe's neighbor, his neighbor. And in this one, the neighbor is also masculine, but it's her neighbor. So maybe you're talking about Layla's neighbor, her neighbor. Okay? So those are your possessive pronouns. So let's do some more examples here. Here's a chart that you're going to fill in. And you're going to use the word in this one. I'll write it out bigger. Sayyara, which means car. And let's change this because we already did book. So instead of using book, let's use a different word. let's use the word bait, which is house. So go ahead and pause the video, fill in the blanks, and then come back. Okay, so I'm going to start with bait, and then I'm going to do sayara. So bait, I have the word bait here. Oops. And then I simply add the ya at the end. Baiti, my house. So for all of them, because the word bait connects, I'm going to keep it like this. And those pronouns that we're attaching are going to connect to that letter ta. So baiti, my house. Baituka and baituki, depending on the gender of who your is, your house. So obviously it won't take both. I'm just saying that if it's masculine, it'll take fatha. If it's feminine, it'll take kasra. Baytuhu, his house. And baytuha, her house. Now let's do that with sayyara. When you have a word that ends in a ta marbuta, it's going to connect to a regular ta. So you open that ta up, so it's going to look like a ta maftuha. So I'm going to open it up for all of them. Sayyara. And then we attach. Once we open that ta up, then we can attach our ending. So, sayyarati, my car. Sayyaratuka, sayyaratuki, your car. Sayyaratuhu, his car. Sayyaratuha, her car. Okay. Now this right here, these are examples of possession. When you're telling me whose thing this is. Okay? And notice when it's possession, the possessor or the person whose thing it is comes second. Right? So it's car. For instance, we look at car and then hers. Car of her, her car. So when we say her car in English, we put the possession first, but in Arabic, it comes after that noun. Because remember, in noun adjective phrases, the nouns come first. In possessive phrases, nouns also come first. It's the same thing. So we can also do here a possessive phrase, which is similar to a noun adjective phrase, just like I said, in that the noun comes first. So if I want to say, for instance, the neighbor's car, I'm going to put the word car first. I'm going to say sayyara. And then I'm going to say the word the neighbor, al-jar. Whoops. Okay. Sayyarat al-jar. So why don't you do the same thing? I'll put it up here. Make it a little bit longer. My dad's house. Go ahead, pause, and then come back. Okay, so the word house comes first because that's the noun. And the possessor, the person whose house, that comes second. So we put first bait. And then my dad. Remember, dad is the word ab, and we add the ya to the end to make it my dad. So bait, abi, means my dad's house. Okay. We also want to cover here to have, the question marks came up because I wrote in Arabic and it didn't capture it. But it's the word عند. And عند is what we call a preposition. And that was what I was referring to as harf earlier. There are words that also take possessive endings or attached pronoun endings, but they're not nouns. And this is an example of that kind of word. عند means to have. It does not function as a verb like it does in English. it functions as a preposition. Okay? So if I want to say I have, okay, أنا, I have, we take the word عند and we attach the ya to the end, just like we did for possession. عندي means I have. عندي بيت كبير. I have a big house. If I want to say أنت or أنتي, you have, we're going to take the word عند and we're going to pronounce it with a kaf. Now, if you want to be super formal, you can say عندك or عندك. But a lot of times what people do now is they just put that fatha or that kasra that's on the kaf, they just transfer it over and put it on the dal, the letter before. So عندك, you have, masculine, and عندك, you have, feminine. Okay. You have. عندك. For huwa and hiya, if I want to say he has, same thing. I take the word عند, I'll put it here. For huwa, if I want to say he has, I want to refer to him, he has, عنده. Remember, dal doesn't connect. He has. And for she has, عندها, ha alif. Okay. عندي, I have. عندك, you have. عندك, you have, feminine. عنده, he has. عندها, she has. Okay. So let's say I want to say my sister has a big house. Pause it and come back. Okay, my sister, أخت, and I want to make it mine, so I add a ya. أختي has. Has and have are the same thing in Arabic. Okay? You want to refer to the feminine because your sister is the one who has. So you have to use the feminine form. So we're going to say عندها, a big house. There's no word for it's just you don't put alif lam. Big house. Which word comes first? The noun. So we're going to put house, beit, and then the word big, kabir. If any of these words are unfamiliar, check the Quizlet vocab 130 review. Okay, so let's try a couple more. If I want to say, my dad has a table in his room. So go ahead and pause the video and try to do this. So when we see a sentence like this, we want to break it down part by part. So the first part is my dad. That's one unit. So there's not a separate word for my. Remember that my is a pronoun that we're attaching to the end of the word dad. So we have here, ab is dad, and we attach the ya to the end, right? So it should look like this. Abi has, and the word has is that عند, but every time you use عند, you have to have that pronoun attached to it, defining who it is that has. So since we're talking about my dad and he's masculine, right? He's male, so we're going to use the masculine pronoun. عنده. We're going to attach the ha at the end with the dhamma. عنده, a table. There's no word for a table. The way that you get is by simply not having alif lam on the word, on the noun. So the word for table, what's the word for table? If you're struggling with vocab, look at the vocab Quizlet from 130. طاولة. طاوي لا. It's a feminine word. In. في. His room. So here we have another pronoun just like we had my. We've got this one with possession. So we want to take the word غرفة, which is room, and attach his, just like we did here, at the end. So we're going to take the word like this, غرفة, and then whenever you attach ta مربوطة to another letter, we open it up so it looks like a regular ta. Okay? So when we do that, we will get في غرفتي, just like this. Okay, so we just attach the letter ha. Now, what if we wanted to say he has a small table in his room? Pause the video and figure out where the word small would go and how you would write it. So if we want to say a small table, that's an adjective for the word table. So the noun comes first. So that's this noun right here, طاولة. Then we would add right here the word small. And the word small is صغير. But because طاولة is feminine, we're going to make it صغيرة. أبي عنده طاولة صغيرة في غرفتي. Okay? Okay. So now let's move on and look at verbs. We also did some verbs in 130. And the verbs that we did were for only 3 pronouns. We looked at أنا, okay? We looked at هو, and we looked at هي. Okay? And we said that whenever you have أنا, you're talking about yourself, we start with the alif hamza. So it's a little bit blurry here, so I'll rewrite it. أنا أحب. أحب, which means love or like. أنا أحب أبي. I love my dad. أحب. Okay? If I want to make it he loves or he likes, we change this first letter to the letter ya. So it starts with the ya. Same exact harakat. يحب. Everything else remains the same. It's just the first letter that's changing. Notice here we connect the ya because the letter ha connects. But here we do not connect the two because alif does not connect to what comes after it. So huwa yuhibbu, he loves. And if I want to say she loves, hiya is going to start with a ta. Hiya tuhibbu. Okay. So we'll start here. Uhibbu, yuhibbu, tuhibbu. So now we want to look at the same exact thing in a few other verbs that we have. Okay. So the verbs that we did last time were to go. Okay. And that is the verb يذهب. Anytime you see the verb in its infinitive form, it's going to be in its masculine form. That's the default. يذهب. And it usually comes with the pronoun إلى, goes to. يذهب or يذهب. If you want to pronounce the lamma on the end, you can, or you can stop on it. يذهب إلى الجامعة. He goes to the university. يذهب إلى البيت. Goes to the house. Okay. So we have هو يذهب with a ya. Then we have, let's just going on top, هي, she goes, تذهب, and أنا, it's that alif hamza again, أذهب. Notice all the harakat stay the same. So there's a fatha on the first letter, there's a sukoon on the second letter, there's a fatha on the third letter. In this one, there was a dhamma on the first letter. All of them had a dhamma. Kasra on the first letter. All of them had a kasra. And shadda on the third. So the harakat all stay the same. So in that verb, the pattern stays the same for all of the different pronouns you're changing the verb for. It's just the first letter the prefix that you're changing. And later on we'll learn there's a couple of them where you add a suffix. But for right now, we're just looking at the prefixes. So now you're going to fill in the blanks. We're looking at the verb yaskun. Okay. And yaskun means lives. So when we say huwa yaskun means he lives. So how would we say hiya, she lives, and I live? Go ahead, pause, and then come back. So we're going to change the ya to a ta for the feminine. Hiya taskun. Ana, we're going to start with alif hamza, askun. I live. And then the last one you're going to do is the verb yashrab, means to drink. So yashrab, he drinks. Pause and come back. Okay, she drinks. Change the first letter to a ta. Everything else stays the same. Fatha. Sheen here has a sukun. Ra has a fatha and ba. Hiya tashrab, she drinks. Okay, ana, I drink. Alif hamza, fatha. Oops. Sheen here has a sukun. Ra, fatha, ba. Ashrab. So, now what we want to do is some practice. Did I put any verbs here? Yeah, I had one verb here. But let's do a couple of sentences here and then we'll move on to that one. So I want to say, let's do, my sister lives with her husband. Pause and come back. Okay. My sister is one unit. So we have the word ukht. We want to add the ya to the end to make it my sister. Lives. The verb always has to match the person doing it. So because my sister is a woman, we're going to use the feminine form. And the feminine form here is hiya, she lives. So we're going to use this right here, taskun. Ukhti taskun. With was one of those prepositions we learned last semester. Ma'a. Her husband, one unit again. So we're going to put the word husband first. Zawj, and then add the ha at the end, ma'a zawji. And you could switch these two if you want. You could say taskun ukhti ma'a zawji. Both would be the same. Okay. Just a refresher in case you don't remember the prepositions that we did. We covered fi, which means in. We covered ma'a, which means with. And usually it's with people. Covered be, which is also with, but usually with some sort of tool, or it can mean by way of. So for instance, you could say bisayyara. And the thing that's special about this letter ba is when you attach it to a word, or when you want to put it with another word. So if I want to say by car, bi, and the word sayyara, what actually ends up happening is because it's only one letter, we simply attach it right there. It attaches to that alif. Right, like this. Bisayyara. And remember here, the reason why we're not, comes with a kasra every time. The reason why we're not pronouncing this lam is because the sin is harf shamsi. It's a sun letter. So in that word, we don't even pronounce the lam. As-sayyara. So if you have a letter or a word before it, it connects to that sin. Bis-sayyara. Okay. And then the other preposition that we did last semester was, whoops, I just did that one. was, what was it? Min. Min meaning from. And it has a helping vowel that it comes with sometimes, which is the fatha on the noon. And that's only if you have a word after min that has alif lam, it gets pronounced with a fatha. Okay? So for instance, if I want to say from home or from the house, and we say min and we have al-bayt. Min al-bayt. In order to connect the two together seamlessly, what we do is we use that helping vowel, the fatha on the noon, na, and simply connect it to that lam. So instead of saying min al-bayt, we say min al-bayt. Okay? So remember when we did huruf shamsiyya wal qamariyya and we talked about alif lam, we said that alif lam, that alif is always, the symbol means a wasla. Hamzat al-wasl just means that alif there can be skipped over. You elide over it if you have a word before the word that has alif lam. Okay? So if you have any questions about this at all, this should be a review, but if you have questions about it at all, just drop a question in the question forum. Okay? Okay, so now we're going to do these. Go ahead and pause your page, and you are going to translate these. Ignore the, I don't know, I think this was just formatting the question marks. Pause the page. You're going to translate these into Arabic and then come back and see how you did. Okay. She has, so we're going to say the feminine form, عندها, a dog, which means the word doesn't have alif lam because it's a. كلب, في, her house. We take the word bait, and what do we do to make it hers? We add that ha alif, baytha. The students. The students, that was a vocab word from last semester. At-tullab. At-tullab, the students. Remember we put alif lam because it's the. R, what did we say about R? This is a special thing that we want to bring up. Is and R do not get translated into Arabic the way they do in English. So if you see is or are in a sentence, you can just ignore it. Okay? And just move on to the next word because we don't have a word for that. We don't use it the same way. So the students, fi, it implies are in. Okay? Are in the library. So that word has to have alif lam. Al-maktaba. Remember when we write the meme, we put it in the corner. Whoops. Move that there. If you ended up writing it like this, that's fine. Okay. Okay, I study. You can start with ana, but you don't have to. I study. Adrus. This is a new verb. We're going to cover it in unit 1, in lesson 1. Adrus. Al-Arabiyya. This is also new in terms of spelling. Arabic. A-ra-bi-ya. Adrus al-Arabiyya. In or at. Fi can be in or at. Fi, university. Al-Jami'ah. Okay. We're going to be covering a lesson in lesson 1 about why we use alif lam here. But long story short, if you don't put alif lam, it implies that the word means a. And you're not trying to say in a university, you're trying to say generally in university. But we're going to cover a whole lesson on that next week. Okay? So if you didn't get that, that's okay. Okay, this is my brother. Because I'm talking about my brother, we're going to say hada. We ignore the is. My brother. Hada akhi. And wa. Hada. So we want to use the feminine form. This was hada. What's the feminine form since we're talking about sister now? is هذه. وهذه is, we ignore that, your sister. So we take the word أخت first. How do we make it yours? Add a kaf, أختك. Okay, and last one. Your city is beautiful. We have the word Medina, like this, Medina. But we want to say your city. So we change that to a ta. The ta marbuta, make it a regular ta. Add a kaf here. Madinatuka. Pronounce it with the dhamma. Madinatuka is, we ignore, beautiful. The word for beautiful is jamil. But what do we have to add since Medina here has a ta marbuta? It's a feminine word. So we're going to add a ta marbuta. Madinatuka jamila. Wa. I love. So we start it with the hamza. Uhib. And when you want to say I love it, there's no word for it. You have to just use either the huwa or the hiya, the he or she. And when you want to add her, we add the feminine pronoun ha alif. Uhibbuha. We'll cover this a lot more in the next couple of weeks. Okay? So that was the review. If you have any questions at all, let me know. We have a reading exercise that's going to be on HFC Online, so you can check that out.